Harry, and joining me this morning, Senior Medical Lab Technologist Mr. Walter Jones, and also the coordinator of the National HIV/AIDS Response Unit, Lester Guy. Good morning, gentlemen.
Yeah. Good morning.
Good morning. And how are you doing this morning?
Fine, thanks, and happy to be here.
Now, Mr. Jones, it's a special week for you all in particular. I want to say a very happy Medical Laboratory Professionals Week to you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate that.
Of course, this is a very trying time for lab techs around the world. And I think now more than ever, we have come to value the contribution that you all make in the medical sector. And, we probably take you all for granted a lot. We just see you come, you prick us with a needle, or that's all we remember. Some person prick me with a needle, they take my blood, and that's it. But you all have been putting in the work. And, with every emerging disease, every emerging pandemic, you have to up your skills every time. And I know that you at the medical lab at the hospital, you all have been doing that.
Yeah.
All right, so let's get right into the meat of things. Let's start off, first of all, with speaking about how the COVID-19 pandemic has affected you and your staff at the medical laboratory. I know, for instance, you've received training from PAHO, that to get you able to test for this. So tell us about the impact of the pandemic in the lab.
Okay. Things have really changed, and we read about pandemics and we study these things, but the reality of it was just so different. First of all, we were not anticipating what was going to happen, but because of people love to say, why Dominica? Why did the hurricane hit Dominica? Why this? This time we can say, why not Dominica? And I say this because in January of 2019, we received a call from Dr. Gresh from PAHO, stating that PAHO had purchased for us a PCR machine. Now, this must be placed against the backdrop of the fact that a new hospital was being built, and one of the design inputs was that there be a molecular lab. Now, a molecular lab requires special structural design. You need to have clean rooms, etc. And this was there in place. And then January 2019, we received word that a PCR machine had been purchased for us. We were so very grateful for that and excited. Throughout the coming months, the negotiations went out, and in October, the machine was installed. Now, you have to remember that there was no mention of COVID at that time. Nothing at all. Later in March of 2020, the PAHO specialist virologist Dr. Gresh came down and conducted training for our staff, in-house training. And there was no time to do anything. We had to just dive in headlong into performing the diagnostic test for COVID-19. Now, we have a very dedicated staff. We have somebody in charge of this process who is very committed, stickler for details, and I just want to compliment them because the effort that it took, these people were there night and day, trying to ensure that we kept in pace with the barrage of samples that were heading our way. And every day, every night, throughout almost a 24-hour shift, work had to be done. We have the administrative head, the lab superintendent, and then the technical people involved. And then we have the support crew, which is the rest of the staff who have to do other things to ensure that there is a swift processing of what is happening. So this was something that we had to get accustomed to. We had to learn certain things as we went. Today, I'm very proud of us because it has gone good. And, we have received so many inquiries from people around the Caribbean How did you do that? What are you doing? How did you get there? And people just couldn't understand how little Dominica was able to be in a position to perform molecular testing for a novel virus that was just a couple months known to us. But again, like I said, why not Dominica?
And you mentioned molecular testing. Tell what is that exactly? What does that mean?
Okay, with molecular and the specific test, we call it real-time reverse transcriptase polymerase chain reaction. That's the full name of the test that we're doing. Real-time because we can see what is happening, and this is one of the control measures. While the test is going on, you can see on a screen what is expected. You can monitor it, so you can implement your controls. You can know if things are going good. You can know what amount of, let's say, activity is taking place. Now, PCR or molecular testing is the highest grade of testing. Why? Because you are using an actual piece of the virus. So other tests, you look into the serum, you look into things that are associated with the virus. But with PCR, you are actually taking a piece of the virus. And any little piece, that's the beauty of it. So specificity and sensitivity is at its highest with that test. It's not something that look like or whatever it is. You see, when the virus comes, the first thing that is done is something called sequencing. So the scientists, they take the piece of the virus and they look for the code. And without going into too many technical things, but they get the code of that particular virus. So we know the virus, let's say its code is ABCD, and we know it. So because of that, we can develop the various other probes and primers to match with that. Because what happens with that test is that once you get a piece of the virus, you can make many, many other pieces, and then you attach markers to it that will show you the amount of pieces that are there, and you can test it. I will not go further than that. But suffice it to say, because you are using the actual piece of the virus, you cannot get more sensitive and specific than that. And this is what places PCR and the test that we are currently doing at the medical lab above every other test that you may be able to try to do for coronavirus.
All right. Now, what about the testing process, though? If I were a suspected case of COVID-19 and I would be taken, the testing has to be done for me. What should I expect to happen?
Okay. Now, the lab is one cog in a wheel of a team. Now, so samples are brought to us, and you would have heard from other people about the swabbing process. So without going into too much on that side, a swab is taken from the nasopharyngeal area and throat and placed in what we call a viral transport medium that will keep it alive and well and moist to be transported to the lab. Once it gets there, we have to be very careful because this is live viruses that we're talking about. So this process is done initially in a sealed room under very strict condition because there's no room for errors, because like I said, you can inoculate yourself very easily if an error is made. So carefully, the test is started in a sealed room. And what really happens in the first instance is that you have to clean off the sample. So all fats and proteins and so forth that are not part of the testing are removed. And then you proceed. There's a machine called, well, like I spoke earlier on, it's called a Fast 7500. And that is the machine that we use. Now, what happens there is that it has a screen, and you can actually see what is happening. There are various stages in that testing, a number of stages, and it takes a couple hours to do it. And you use, well, they call it a thermocycler because it uses heat, cooling, and heating so that the process of denaturation, etc., can take place. But suffice it to say that it takes careful eyes and hands over a period of several hours to move to achieve what we just spoke about, which is taking a piece of the virus, replicating it many, many, many millions of times, and then measuring it on that machine.
All right. So, what are the chances, though, of a sample getting contaminated or even getting false negatives or false positives from that testing?
Okay, quality assurance has to be number one in that process. And this is why quality assurance starts. One, we have to ensure that the samples we receive are properly taken and properly stored and transported to us. That's the first area. Secondly, we have to ensure that the persons who are involved in testing have been deemed competent by a competent authority or institution, and this happened. Thirdly, we have to ensure that the structures that we use, the room, the location, it adheres to standard recommendations. And then fourthly, we have to ensure that there is careful processing of everything that we do. Now, you have to check and double check. And this is why, people might see a medical technologist functioning and might think that this looks easy. It's like flying a plane, it's like everything else. I can do that. But it takes quite a bit of alertness and skill to be able to do what we do. And so errors, we have to watch out for errors from day one, from point one, to ensure. But we have many built-in controls and guards to ensure that no error is made. Now, this is why, like I said, in this system, there's built-in controls. Then the kit itself, it has its own positive and negative controls that you also can see if your system is working. So because this is such a high level of testing, there are several levels of test controls that we put in. I need to mention also that we are in constant contact with the virologists at PAHO in Washington. Therefore, all day, all night, emails are going back and forth. The runs that we do, they are validated by this virologist. So we always ask, look at the runs. Are you satisfied? Is everything working? Do you have any recommendation? So this happens on a constant basis. So if there is any problem, we have help within an email speed from us. So we've taken like a number of steps to ensure that quality is at the highest level because we cannot afford to make an error.
Definitely. Now, we heard some time back people expressing concerns that they're hearing about the testing kits being expired or things like that. Should people even be concerned about that?
No, we don't have testing kits expired. So the testing kits that we're using, they just came from Washington, so they're not expired. Mm-hmm. You may have heard about something that appeared to be expired, which is one of the vials that was used. But the thing is that the CAFA, which is one of our partner agencies, have instructed us that as to how to use that. So we are well clear in terms of the use of that. This is the viral transport media, it's not the testing kit. Our testing kits are in date and they're working fine. So there's no issue about quality. And like I said, we are in all what we do are positives. We are sending them to be validated. So we have double and triple checks. So people need not worry about false anything. We are right on target with what we do.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Jones. And like I mentioned earlier, we have with us from the National HIV/AIDS Response Unit, Mr. Lester Guy. Lester, we keep hearing about a certain group demographic that are particularly prone to contracting COVID-19, and that those are the ones who are immunocompromised. And you and your team work specifically with that demographic. What does it mean to be immunocompromised?
Okay, good morning again, Sheena and the listening public. What does it mean to be immunocompromised? As we would have learned that somebody who's HIV positive, immune system is compromised in the sense that the virus attacks your immune system. The HIV virus attacks your immune system. And HIV is one of the diseases that's considered you being immunocompromised. Cancer is also one of them. Certain types of cancer is also you're also immunocompromised. But in the context that we're speaking right now, if we speak about persons who are HIV positive or persons who have developed AIDS, it means that the body immune system is not as fortified, it's not as strong as somebody who's normal. Interestingly, I should add that though, somebody can be HIV positive and their immune system is still okay. Once they're taking their medication and the viral load is what they call they are virally suppressed, it means that their immune system is also very, very strong. Okay? But still, you still have to bear in mind that any illness that you have, it may be one of our comorbidities, for example, hypertension, asthma, diabetes, it still puts you at a risk. You are one of the persons who will be in the demographic of being at a higher risk for transmitting the COVID-19 virus. But I have had the opportunity, I have been in 2 online discussions, or virtual discussions, and as it relates to persons who are HIV positive and how it relates to COVID-19. And there's no specific evidence, on-point evidence that points to somebody who's HIV positive is more at risk of somebody who may be hypertensive or somebody who may have diabetes. The risk is basically the same. We're just talking about underlying conditions.
Right.
What I will add to that, though, I will say if somebody is HIV positive and they're not very adherent to the treatment, it means that their immune system would be a lot weaker, in common terms, a lot weaker than somebody who is virally suppressed.
Okay.
So that puts you at an extra risk. Whenever a foreign or a danger comes towards your body or enters into your body has to fight it out. And if your immune system is already compromised,
Right.
it's going to take a lot more to fight it out. I always make the example of the common flu. They encourage us to take our vitamin C, that our immune system can be a little more boosted for the common flu, and that happens for every other illness. Your immune system, how you eat, how you exercise, how you take care of your body, is very much important as to how you're going to fight any bacteria or virus that enters into your system. So for persons who are HIV positive, they're not at any extra risk per se. They just have an underlying condition. But it means that they have to also be vigilant as to how and what they do, when they do, where they do, and with who they do what they do.
Right.
All right? In the sense that if you are somebody who's HIV positive, making sure that you wear your mask, making sure that you don't go into crowds where you don't necessarily need to be, practicing your hand washing, hygienic practices is extremely important for you, because if you are not virally suppressed, it means that your risk is also high. So that is something that we talk about a lot. But from an scientific evidential point of view, HIV positive persons are not at any higher risk per se than somebody else who has any other comorbidity.
All right. Now, you and the organization, you are very familiar with things like stigma.
Oh, yes.
And we've noticed that a certain type of stigma has been associated with people who have been testing positive for COVID-19. Now, seeing you have some experience with that, tell us, what would be your advice to someone who is being stigmatized, because they were tested positive?
Wow, that's such a question that I wasn't expecting. But I'll tell you what, though. We have had our challenges with stigma and discrimination as it relates to HIV and AIDS. And I think it has been a very difficult battle. And I think it's not only from a small island point of view, something that I've recognized over the times I've interfaced with all of my colleagues across the globe, that this challenge is the same thing for everyone in every circumstance as it relates to HIV. And I would say that, though, with this COVID-19, I have been part of the test, how would I say, the contacting and the sampling team for the COVID-19, together with the Director of Primary Health Care. And I realized that sometimes when you contact people, how easy it is for persons to get very defensive. When you call them and say, I'm calling from the Ministry of Health, and you may have been in contact with or interacted with somebody who has been tested positive or who may be positive, and initially you get that response.
Right.
I remember there's a situation where we literally had to talk down a gentleman for him to understand how important it is for protecting yourself, your family, and your community. And people were very concerned about, well, when the ambulance comes to my home, what are people going to think?
Right.
One of the things I've always said to people, it has a lot to do with how you show yourself. Yes, the healthcare system has to play its part in terms of protecting you, protecting your confidentiality. But there are some aspects of it that we have totally no control. If the ambulance comes to my home, people are going to see the ambulance coming to my home. How do I react to it? So most of what we've always done over the years is give people information. The more information people have, the more educated people become, and the easier it is for you to see a change. I always say, information and education that is not acted upon isn't education. Until people have learned to accept and act accordingly to the information that they have, it's basically just having information that is useless.
Right.
And I've always tried to encourage that with my patients also. You within yourself have to be able to feel comfortable within yourself. It doesn't mean that if you're HIV positive or if you got COVID that you went looking for it. It doesn't mean that if you're in the COVID center or you have been on quarantine, that is your fault. And people need to understand that, and sometimes communicating with people and informing them that this is the situation that I'm in, I'm looking to protect myself, my family, and by extension, my community and my country, then they start seeing it differently.
Right.
So reasoning with them on a certain level do help people to understand how important it is not to stigmatize or discriminate people, because it means that if people are fearful of coming in, let's say with same COVID-19, what do you think is going to happen? We're going to have a rippling effect of persons getting positive or getting the virus. So it means that you within yourself, and I think, let me just adjust that one point again, the healthcare providers have to be able to sit down with clients and patients and say, this is the situation, this is where you're at, and this is where we're trying to get you, and people around you need to learn to understand that. So information is vital.
Okay, so tell us what, in this time, it's such a stressful time, so much anxiety. And you have, like you mentioned, the patients who may have tested positive for HIV, and they may be very concerned, very troubled about their risk. What support can your unit provide?
Right. Good. We've been able to do a lot of that, I must say. I'm very proud of my staff for doing all of what they did during that time. We had our lines open. In fact, if you go to my office, you'll still see my telephone number stuck on the door outside. Okay? Anybody who comes in and have any questions or queries, and because we already established a very good rapport with our clients and our patients, there are numbers of persons who, for example, our counselor or PMTC coordinator, myself, that you can reach out to at any given time if you're going through any difficult time in terms of anxiety and so on, that you can contact us and we'll walk you through, we'll talk you through. In fact, I just got a message from one of my colleagues who is actually part of the Dominica Psychological Society, which we have given the opportunity. We have a hotline that people can call in. So even if you cannot get to the government system, there are also NGOs and CSOs who are out there. Once you look for the information is available and you can call. I mean, yes, I would have to take my telephone and call you sometimes, but if you call me, I will be able to spend the time with you and at least talk you through. So we've been able to do a lot of that.
All right. And, back to you, Mr. Jones, very quickly. We're talking about protecting. We always emphasize that people should be protecting themselves first and foremost, because, like we say in the health promotion unit, your health is your responsibility. You and your staff come in contact with so many samples, be it from suspected HIV positive individuals, suspected COVID patients. What protocols are in place for you to protect yourself and your staff?
This is an important question because there's been so much confusion as to what really is, how should people act and behave, not just in the lab but outside. There's something called universal precaution. Universal precaution assumes that everybody has everything. So there are some standard things that you do because, you see, what we've tried to avoid is that the hysteria and the panic about a suspected COVID, and you ask yourself, how does that differ from somebody who has COVID but is asymptomatic? So we have to behave in a particular way across the board. Now, granted, there will always be a higher level of protection when you are sure that you're dealing with COVID. But the emphasis has to be that a medtech has to wear protective gear, PPE, your gloves, your mask when necessary, your lab coat, and to adopt certain practices like the use of bleach to sanitize your desktop and your telephones and so forth. These are not things that came with COVID. These are standard laboratory practices, and we have to highlight the fact that, hey guys, COVID, whether it's COVID, hepatitis C, HIV, all these viruses are always there, and you have to behave in such a way, that prevents you from contracting them. So, even out in society now, it's good that people understand that some of these distancing methods we have there, we still need to use some of them in terms of the flu and some of the other things. And so at the lab, we have, the people who are in the room doing that must take a higher level of protection in terms of wearing, certain types of gowns and so forth. But the emphasis remains before, now, and after universal precaution for all medtechs.
Now, we were talking physical health, but let's also talk about psychological, because like Mr. Guy mentioned, they have that support for their clients, their patients. But your staff would also need some kind of psychological support, because I'm sure, whenever a test comes back positive, that has a tremendous impact on your staffing. So what do you do for that?
Medtechs are strange creatures, eh? Medtechs are very strange creatures. And when I say that, I say it in a complimentary way. We love what we do. We enjoy seeing our tests work. We enjoy seeing that we are recovering what we should recover, that our controls are coming in, that our tests are coming in. We're happy that we could get involved in molecular biology. So some of these things, I hear what you say, and we are human, but we thank God that people have been keeping. We sort of lean on each other for support, and there's good rapport, there's good camaraderie going on, and from a management standpoint, we have been looking at everybody to see if we can pick up anything from, especially frontline workers, any sign of burnout or so forth. But people are just happy. The guys are there and they don't want to leave. They are involved. It is strange, but I tell you, hats off to these guys who have been just going, and happy to be involved in a historic process. So I don't know, Sheena, maybe you'll ask me that question in a month's time or 2 months' time, but so far so good.
All right, we are very happy to hear that. And, like you said, it's a matter of seeing your test working. So even if the result is positive, to you, it doesn't necessarily mean something bad. It means that what we're doing is impactful.
Yeah, I tell you what, you have to take it from the standpoint. We're not callous people.
Right.
But all our lives we have had to be delivering results of cancer and HIV positive and diabetes, and we give out a lot of bad news, leukemia. So COVID just follows in that line. This is what we signed for, to be an intermediary between a person and the doctor. And so we cannot afford to start crying when we get a positive result. That means that the next person who needs our service will be deprived of it if we get emotional. So it takes a certain breed of people to, amidst all that bad news, to stand up and continue to do your work.
Well, we are certainly happy we have that breed of people here. So thank you so much for all of your efforts. Let's open the phone lines. I'm sure the general public would like to get a few calls and questions in. The numbers to call 1-800-327-448-3284, 449-8719, 616-1327, and 305-432-9744. That's the overseas line. Give us a call if you have any questions or comments. Now, Mr. Guy, back to you. You mentioned that you are on the team that would do the contact tracing and so forth. Tell us a little, what has that experience been like for you?
Well, it's been eye-opening to an extent, but it also gives you a high sense of satisfaction, knowing that you may not be one of the persons on the direct front line, but you are impacting people's life on a level. I mean, I remember having to call persons and tell them, well, this is the situation, or you got your test back, your results back, and it's negative, and to hear in their voice the sigh of relief. But you still have to tell them you need to continue practicing your social distancing and your physical distancing, and making sure that you're home and you don't have people come to your home.
Right.
I mean, we had to call almost the entire population of a specific school at some point, and parents were expecting the call, you know. So it made it quite interesting, but it also gave you an opportunity to see how your general public is reacting to what is in front of them. And it provides you with a bit of skills or resources as to where we are as a country and what we need to implement more, or what we need to stress on more for our general public.
Right.
So it gave you a little bit of eye-opener. So the advertisement, that health promotion we were making and so on, you'd find that because of that discussion with somebody, you could have pulled out something that you were not even aware of.
Right,
And I think
right.
it was very interesting. But also it was wonderful working with the team. I mean, it was so good telling the teams, okay, we needed to go out there on that specific day and we needed to at least get 14 persons or 15 persons, and how they reacted. I must say,
Yeah.
I've had that double experience, that triple experience with Dominica, 2015, 2017, 2015, 2017 and 2020. See how our healthcare providers respond in a crisis. It's amazing. Now, you don't know what goes on behind the doors. You have your challenges.
Definitely.
You have your personalities. But it's so nice to see people on the money and say, yes, we will go. When do you want us to go? Where do you want us to go? And I think that was really good for me. You know, I may not be as young in the system as I seem, but it was something that was really rewarding on part. And I must commend our healthcare providers who were part of that frontline team, going out and doing the testing and stuff. But it also made an opportunity for you to really get to know your people and see how they're reacting in a given situation. I'm talking about your general public,
Of course.
and how sometimes they don't understand stuff, and how when you break it down to them, how receptive they are. I think that was really a good experience from that.
All right. I believe we have a caller on the line. Caller, go ahead. You're live.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
That's a very good program. I think anything that's educational, especially in a time like this, is exceptionally good. Let me begin before I ask my question by commending your two guests, but especially those who are working very hard in this very difficult and trying time that we're going through. The frontline workers, Ministry of Health, I think the work is by excellence, and our reports can tell. I mean, every day I look forward to getting the reports of what's going on, and to see that we're making such good progress. It means our health system in Dominica is really taking this thing under control. A part of my commendation also goes to the Dominican public, because I think the fact that we are able to curb the spread, it means that we are submitting to the rules and regulations that have been placed on us. They're not the easiest, but the cooperation of the Dominican public, I think I must commend our people for being very obedient to the laws and to the rules and to regulations. I am hoping that maybe some of this can, as we behave better and as we behave well and we see better results in the near future, that probably some of these stringent measures can be a little bit more relieved to give us a little bit more open time, with the hope that we can maybe keep our borders a bit closed from importing anymore. My question has to do with the asymptomatic people, because I think that would be, from what I heard from your press release yesterday or your press conference, that may be one of the bigger concerns at this time, seeing that we were able to keep the 16 cases, positive cases, under control, and thus far have been able to release at least 9 of these patients. And from what I heard from the Ministry of Health, probably on Tuesday, probably a few more might be discharged by the end of this week. And that's very commendable. But my question has to do with the asymptomatic people. Eventually, if a person is asymptomatic, that simply means he does not exhibit any symptoms relative to the disease, to COVID-19. But wouldn't there be a period of time that he or she would have to pass on or infect somebody else with that disease? So if a person can be asymptomatic for, let's say, 21 days, 30 days, and not and someone close to him or her, or someone who has come in contact with him or her, become infected by the virus and begin to exhibit symptoms? Because I was looking at the asymptomatic. How long can a person remain asymptomatic and not infect someone else? So would someone else eventually become infected by them? And over what period of time would that infection be able to be manifested? That's my question.
All right. Thank you, caller. Mr. Jones?
Okay. Without giving specific timelines, what I will say is that there's always the fear that we may have asymptomatic people in our population. This is something we cannot do anything about it because the virus has a life of its own. It has a mode of its own. And for some people, there will be an aggressive phase, and other people, they'll be asymptomatic. This is why the preventative measures such as social distancing and so forth has to remain in effect for a while because there may be some people who are asymptomatic. So because we have not gotten any cases for a while, because nobody has died and so forth, it doesn't mean that we are out of the loop yet. So very good question in terms of reaching out to people and saying that we still need to maintain social distancing, right, and to get this virus to out of our system. Mm-hmm. What I can tell you also is that, and so yes, they can infect other people. What I can say also is that after a while, there'll be a community testing, as the minister has already alluded to. We'll be doing another type of test to see what happened in the population. This has certain preliminary protocols to be put in place before it can happen. Mm-hmm. But this will be for our learning, for our knowledge in terms of what really happened behind the scene. What amount of people were asymptomatic and we did not know? What amount of people were not honest in what they said to the health officials? So this population study, which we will conduct, it will give us an insight into what really happens behind the scene that we were not aware of.
Mm-hmm. All right. We have, before we go to our next caller, we have another caller. But, Mr. Guy, that kind of ties in with what you guys do. Because when we talk asymptomatic, people with HIV often are. You cannot tell. So I always tell people we treat everybody as a suspect. Right?
Very correct. Very correct. And that's the thing. This process is different for different people. But as I said, people's immune system is different. You might find I'm exposed to the cold to the common flu with the same person as Mr. Jones. And by tomorrow I'm coughing and sneezing. And Mr. Jones takes a little time before he starts. So the disease process is different. And I think we've been using the 7 and 14 days really good from a health system perspective. Somebody can stay asymptomatic for a while because of how developed or strong the immune system is. And that is why it's important for the general public to also understand that. And I keep mentioning the information aspect of it. Somebody can be HIV positive and never show signs and symptoms of AIDS for up to 9-10 years. Somebody may contract it, and in 3 years' time they're showing symptoms of AIDS. So it's very ticklish, and that's why we don't want to put a number on it or days on it, but to continue to encourage persons with we call it more physical distancing more than social distancing. I want to be socially connecting to my people, but physically, based on the 6 feet and the 2 meters, you have to keep encouraging that. So I think it's the process of the disease,
Right.
That's what's important. And once people know and understand why you're telling them to still practice your physical distancing, then hopefully that we can get more positive results.
All right. So we have another caller on the line. Caller, go ahead. You're live.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah, I wish to commend you all guys. I think, and the Ministry of Health by extension, I think they have done a tremendous job over the last couple of weeks. Now, 2 things that really stand out since COVID, somebody was saying there's a positive out of it. Well, they can put it that way. But 2 things that stands out in my mind with that since the advent of COVID-19 is, one, the families. There's a unit, like people kind of stay home and understand what is family in the details and to spend time with their family. Some people were always out and, that sort of thing. And the second thing I admire not admire, but I think it has really helped is to cut down on that alcohol thing. I've always been upset with this. Every weekend, the party and the drinking and indiscriminate driving and all this sort of thing. So people now have a time to reflect. But my question is, Is there any voluntary testing in Dominica so far? Like, for instance, Mr. John Brown can stay at his home and say, "Boy, let me just go and take a test now, just for safety's sake." Can he just step into the facility and say, "Well, can I have a test or something of that sort?"
All right.
I'd like you to speak to that.
Thank you, caller. Mr. Jones.
Thank you.
Okay, the problem about testing is that this is a public health issue. There's what is called, we have a criteria for testing. So, and we follow PAHO recommendations. If you satisfy that criteria, then you're tested. There are other people who may have been exposed, etc. We test. But the problem about this testing is that globally, there is an acute shortage of testing material. Mm-hmm. And we in Dominica, we're very, very fortunate, like I said, because many countries are begging for test material because they cannot test. So it is difficult and impossible to just test people at will. We have to make sure that you fit a certain criteria before we can use it. Maybe later on when test kits are available and so forth, we might move into that phase. But right now, the government, Ministry of Health has had to adhere strictly to WHO protocol. So people cannot just walk out and demand a test. It cannot work so for now.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and let me reiterate what Mr. Jones is saying as it relates to the criteria for testing. And because even initially, when the health centers and so on were shut down for a while, we had a hotline where people would call in and and we'd get somebody to call them back and do an assessment as to what they're presenting with. Mm-hmm. And you'll find people calling for a cough and cold or a sneeze, and they were all perturbed and anxious. Mm-hmm. And you really had to do an assessment, because if we were just testing people at randomly, it would put us in a very difficult situation where we actually need to test persons who may have been, fitting the criteria for testing. So, I had to explain to a number of people, even sometimes healthcare providers, unfortunately, that based on what you're telling me, you've not been in a COVID center, you've not been interacting. I'm not saying a random person could have exposed you, but I'm saying based on the criteria that we had at the time, it will just mean that we're using resources, which is resources that we don't have.
Right.
You understand? So the criteria really helped us, and figuring out how to go about testing people. And I think that is one of the things that worked very well for Dominica, rather than just using your stuff for just using them.
Now, Mr. Jones, even with that though, like I heard Dr. Ahmed mention recently, we are second in the Caribbean per capita, our testing rate, if I remember clearly. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, that's correct. We are way up there. St. Kitts, is close to us, but we are way, way up there. And in terms of the number of tests we've done per 1,000 or per million population, and this is also because we came out early, and we had good contact tracing mechanisms, so we were able to track down people, and our containment in terms of the people entering the country and swabbing them. The whole systematic way of going about it, and we must always remember also the availability of the test, because many of the other countries in the Caribbean have had to send their test to CAFA in Trinidad, and CAFA had a stipulation that they could only do so many tests because Trinidad has a huge population. CAFA is in Trinidad and they have to do for them. So we were very fortunate that we could do our own testing. So our number of tests plus our per capita testing rate is very, very high.
Okay. Now, I also remember a while back you did rapid testing in one community, right, where a few hundred people were tested. Tell us about that. How is that different from, say, the regular testing, and how does that impact you in the lab?
Okay. So I couldn't speak with authority about that aspect of it because I was not involved.
Okay.
That was done. That was done separately.
Okay.
But what I can tell you is that, and you see, when I spoke initially, I told you about the PCR test, that it uses an actual portion of the virus and replicates it and measures it. With the rapid tests, these are serological tests. In serology, what you're looking for is for antibodies. You see, when a virus enters a person, it invades the host, the human body. Now, the person reacts by producing antibodies. Initially, the person produces an antibody called IgM, and over a period of time, the IgM level goes down and the IgG increases. So those test kits, what they do, they look for IgM and IgG. The thing about it is that that can only tell you that you had COVID, that you were exposed. But by that time, you have already recovered from it sufficiently to be able to produce antibodies. So it is not diagnostic. It doesn't tell you that you have it at the moment. You have to do your PCR test where you're looking for the actual viral particles to be able to diagnose that you have COVID. But the serological test, the rapid test, they will tell you that you had. There's a difference.
Now, let me ask you another question. I'm not even sure if you can answer that. Talk is going around about a vaccine being created, about a cure. What can you comment on that, about the potential of a vaccine being out there, or even a cure? Or even, you hear the rumors about if you put some some water by your nose and you use your blow dryer and steam your nose and those kind of things. What can you comment
What
on?
I will tell you is that we've had experts just cropping up from the woodwork. Everybody just became an expert. And with social media, everybody wanted to be on social media. So everybody was just going in front of a camera and making some theory. I mean, we know some things about the bacteria, that it's very heat labile. It doesn't do very good in heat. But, I mean, people have to be careful and try to get information from the World Health Organization, Center for Disease Control, the European Health Organization, these kind of authoritative bodies, and try not to get your information from WhatsApp and this social media, As for the vaccine, development of a vaccine is something that cannot be fast forwarded. It has to take time, because after you've developed the vaccine, you have to do trials. And this takes time. You have to do trial over a wide area. So everybody's saying that they have a vaccine. What I can tell you is that a vaccine cannot be ready no. It has to be tested. So that is all I can say on that. That we should not start queuing up for a vaccine, because it won't be ready. The other thing is that we have to understand the way viruses behave. They mutate. So a virus will start in Roseau as one thing, and by the time it gets to Portsmouth, it has changed a bit. Guess what? You have to alter your vaccine then.
Right.
So we have to be careful about popping the champagne too fast on the development of a vaccine.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Jones. The phone lines are open. We have just a few more minutes, 5 minutes actually, in today's program. 1-800-327-448-3284, 449-38719, and 616-1327. Of course, for those of you in the diaspora who are tuned in, 305-432-9744. Again, let me thank all of those tuned in on the various radio stations across the island: Vibes Radio, Kyrie FM, Voice of Life Radio, Q95, and of course, DBS Radio. Now, gentlemen, let's take this call and then I'll get back to you. We have a caller on the line. Caller, go ahead, you're live.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon to
Very
you.
good program, and I'd like to commend your people for your effort. I realize that to some extent those involved on the field have been having a high from the activity. My question is, this virus, the coronavirus, it normally stays or lives somewhere, in a host. Would that host, would it, one, be making that host sick? And if not, would that host have a protection against the virus that, the virus doesn't affect it? So it normally, like our mouth have bacteria, but that bacteria is not a problem for us. So like the place it resides, how is it able to coexist with that organism? That might just shed light on some of the approaches we may need to take in dealing with it in the future. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, caller.
Okay, so caller, you're quite right. Now, understand, please, that there are many, many coronaviruses. They are practically like animal-dwelling viruses. So you might have heard about the bats and some of the wild creatures. Yes, you have the coronaviruses live in them. And that is why, we talk about the separation of human from animal, because some of these things, like even when there was the HIV, there was, HIV from the rhesus monkey.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there have been theories as to how coronavirus got to human, how it crossed over into human. And that itself is a very complicated process, that how normal flora, a virus that does not affect an animal, but if it gets into human, then
Right.
it's different. No, this is not just for viruses. Bacteria and certain things do the same thing. That certain animals are able to, you know, withstand the attack from the animal. Yet still, if it gets to human being, it's different. So, sir, you're quite correct. What happened is that this one is a novel virus, is a new coronavirus, and it crossed over at whatever time, because there's various theories, and I'm not going to mention them because I have no idea which one is correct. But just to say that yes, it crossed over from animals to humans, and this is something that we have to watch out for going forward in terms of, that human-animal kind of interaction.
All right, we have another caller on the line. Caller, you're live. Go ahead.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead, caller.
Yes, good morning, good morning. I'm not sure if your overseas line is working now, because it has been ringing and it hasn't been answered. So I was just asking, in case you want to check it out.
Okay, thank you.
Secondly, let me, of course, commend you, Sheena, as always, for doing an excellent job in terms of communicating the information and interviewing the people very eloquently.
Thank you.
I want to commend the gentleman, people like Lester and these other guys who is doing a very good job, and the lab technicians and so on, the frontline workers. I think they're making me very proud as a Dominican who live out there. And if what is happening in Dominica was happening out there, I think the world would be a much better and safer place. And I'm not saying I'm not boasting. I'm just being real on the situation. I tuned in not too long ago, so I'm not sure if you are touching this matter already. I just wanted to ask persons who like the asymptomatic, persons who carry the disease or the virus, and there is no sign that they show they have the virus. How long does it take for this individual or individual to show symptoms of the coronavirus? And is there any way that we could probably, if somebody in the environment, the area, for example, somebody, let's say, by DBS radio has that, can we check everybody around that area? And because we hear things like about wearing a mask, it can be in the air, it's airborne, and this type of thing. So is there any way these things can take place? I know it's a bit expensive and costly. I just one suggestion, one question. And I have a suggestion. Many times I hear people talking about if you develop symptoms, if you suffer from anxiety, if you suffer from this and this high, big word that is being used. And we have persons who maybe not understand what is anxiety. We don't understand certain terminology that is being used. Is there a way we can have a TV demonstration to persons to show them what it is can be developed, what is called anxiety, or explain to them in a more fine way or more, simpler way? And I'll say this, the reason why I say that. I do training in the healthcare thing overseas as well. And there was one time I had a training, one of my first training, and I tried to be professional and, produce my words and, and so on and so forth. And then after the meeting, one lady came to me and she said, I did not understand much of the things you said. I asked her, why? So she said, some of the words you use, some of the terminology that you use, I didn't really understand. And from since there, I learned to be very simple in my deliberation. So this is just a suggestion I have, and I don't want to be funny, but just think maybe some people may not understand some of the terminology that may be used. And if there are ways they can put it on TV to demonstrate for people. Have a good day, everybody, and keep doing an excellent job.
Thank you. Thank you so much, caller.
Bye.
All right, so that yeah, he did ask a question that Mr. Guy and Mr. Jones, we touched on earlier, but just to reiterate for him because he must have missed that concerning the asymptomatic individuals. So, Mr. Guy, I think you kind of handled that very well the last time. So, if you want to just stress on that a little bit again.
Okay, so I guess for the benefit of the last caller, so we were talking about the disease process, and we have to be cognizant of the fact that our bodies are going to respond to certain bacteria and viruses different. So we've been pushing a lot from our general health system point of view, the 7 and the 14 days, and we ask people to stay at home for isolation for 14 days for the most, and so on. What we have to bear in mind is that every illness is going to affect persons differently, and every illness has its process. So if somebody is asymptomatic, it would mean that they need to continue practicing physical distancing, which is very important because you are not showing any symptom. And for the general public, being asymptomatic is that you're not showing any symptom of being ill, but it still means that somebody can contract the virus from you. So what we are encouraging people to do is just continue their social distance, because you never know who may have been exposed, and because the process might be different from them. Like I'll use the example again of the common flu. Sometimes two persons are exposed at the same time, and somebody starts showing symptoms a day after, somebody might be showing symptoms 3 days after. So what we're encouraging, and I think, let me just stress on that, and I hope I'm not losing the point. That is what I think a lot of people don't understand. Just because we seem not to be having positive cases right now for the past at least 11 or 10 days, people are assuming that everything is okay. There is a risk involved in it, and that's why we are still telling the business places to practice this physical distancing when people are queuing up in the lines, because you're still not certain. Somebody may have come back door, because that is part of what happens to us, So you have to practice your physical distancing, because the process takes different for different people, and it means that you still need to protect yourself, your family, and those who are around you.
Definitely. Now, as we always say, in the medical field, precaution is better than cure. So we don't want to become complacent. We don't want to be lax in our practices. So right now, like we mentioned, everybody's a suspect. Everybody's suspicious. If you treat everyone suspiciously, then that's your part that you're playing to protect yourself. Now, the other part of his question was about testing everybody. I don't want to miss out any part of his question. So, Mr. Jones, to you, he was talking like, if in a certain area, there's somebody tested positive, how plausible is it? How likely is it to test everybody in that area?
Again, there are protocols for that. The WHO has recommendations because, take for instance, in Jamaica and Trinidad, they had clusters of infection where I think in Jamaica 100 and something people from one establishment were found to be positive. Now the thing about it is that because of resource constraints, you cannot always test every possible contact. So like there are protocols which tells you if there's contact, like in a household, you have certain amount of people that initially you have to test. So all these things are well documented as to how to go about it. We cannot test everybody in a particular village. If somebody was in the market, we cannot test everybody that went to the market. But you have a systematic way of going about it in terms of how much time was the person exposed, how long did they stay there. There are certain protocols and to go about. So, the public can be assured that, that contact tracing and so forth, it is done in a very scientific way so as to maximize use of your resources, but to ensure that nobody is left untested that should be tested.
Definitely. Now, one of the things I always stress is that when people understand how the virus is spread, then they have a better grasp of who should be tested.
Right.
Because just because I'm in my house and perhaps my neighbor 2 houses down was tested positive, that doesn't mean that I need to get tested because probably me and the neighbor golel me according to people. I've never talked to the person. But just because the person is 2 houses down doesn't mean that I have to be, and it's not to be funny or make light of it, but it's the truth. It's that we have to understand how it's spread. We have to get, like Lester has been saying throughout, information is key.
Yeah.
So if you understand these things, then you understand, okay, well, I have been in close contact, and me and this person yesterday, we were, gee and playing dominoes. So maybe there are protocols.
Yeah, yeah.
So that is key. Information is always key. Understanding the virus as much as we can, being that it's a new virus, but understanding as much about it as possible is also key. Gentlemen, we are at that time.
Yep.
Mr. Jones, you see how quickly that went by. All right, just a few final remarks from you. Let's start with you, Mr. Guy.
All right, so I'm glad that we're talking about the testing thing, and you realize that every time we enter into the hospital right now, they're taking the temperature. That is something I think that is something we've put in place to try our best not to overuse our resources, but if and when we are using them, that we are doing it in a systematic way.
Right.
And I think that is working. And I think for everybody out there, again, continue to protect yourself, protect your family by extension. Our physical distancing is still on the table and needs to be done. And I'm encouraging persons to limit the use of alcohol and any other drugs that you're using at present, so that you don't find yourself making really bad decisions.
Definitely.
I think I'll leave you with that.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Jones.
Yeah, I am very happy for the privilege that was given to us this morning, and for the information that we were able to share. I first of all want to say happy Lab Professionals Week to all the labs in Dominica. So we're talking from the north, Omar in Portsmouth lab, and the Adams lab, Alina, Mrs. Laville and them at the diagnostic pre-labs, and the Lafayette lab, Judy and Carla and these people, and then of course the PMH Medical Laboratory and the team there. We want to especially big up those in microbiology, Mr. Carbon and his team, for the kind of work that I've been doing, unselfish work that I've been doing in terms of the corona. We want to thank our superintendent, Mrs. Gemot, for the leadership that she has shown also. And so it's a team effort. There are so many people involved in that. We want to thank people. There are people who just call and say, we're praying for you all.
Definitely.
Send WhatsApp and saying, look, I know it's difficult for you. So we thank people for the kind of support. I go and I see people carrying those boxes coming to bring samples. And I know it's not just us, it's a number of people involved in that process. So I want to compliment the health team, everybody involved, those who have been there from the beginning, especially who still have energy. I pray that God will just continue to strengthen us. And so we have been doing good. Let's continue on that path. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Jones. And you mentioned the facilities. I want to say a quick good afternoon to Dr. Jeffrey Louis and the staff over in Portsmouth. They have been working so very hard, they listen all the time, even if they are bombarded with work over in Portsmouth. But good day to you all. I hope we continue praying for you, and like Mr. Jones said, we continue to pray and support every medical personnel on island for doing such an exceptional job. And we pray for continued strength, as always. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for your time.
Welcome.
Thank you to all the listeners for your attention. And tune in again. Hopefully, we'll be with you on Friday at 11 for another edition of the COVID-19 discussion. In the meantime, have a great day.